Tonight, Democratic Congressman Adam Smith is in Jordan as part of a congressional delegation. He traveled to Egypt and visited the Rafah border crossing where desperately needed humanitarian aid waits to go into war-torn Gaza. Smith is the Democratic leader of the House Armed Services Committee. He's urging the Biden administration to push diplomatic efforts to reach a mutual ceasefire in Gaza to pause the Israel-Hamas war. Mary Nam joining us tonight. And Mary, you spoke with Smith just a short time ago from Jordan. What's the delegation's mission there in the Middle East?
Well, Representative Smith led a delegation with Representatives Mickey Sherrill and Greg Landsman. Smith says the goal was to better understand the conflict that has been raging for nearly 5 months.
I was in Israel for a day and a half, and that nation is still traumatized by October 7th. And they feel like the world just blinked and moved on from it. And really doesn't care about the security threats to Israel and what happened to them in that context. I mean, the nation was created to give Jews some place to be after hundreds of years of being driven out of countries and cities and lands all over the world in brutal fashion. They wanted a place that they could call their own, where they could feel safe. And October 7th really ripped away that feeling that they would ever be safe anywhere. And, you know, Hamas is the reason for that. And as long as they are the militant governing entity in Gaza, Israel feels like they can never be safe. And the other part that is, frequently ignored is Hamas embeds themselves with the civilian population. Hamas tries to drive up the number of civilian casualties by operating out of hospitals and mosques and schools and neighborhoods. And that puts Israel in a very, very difficult situation. But the other big thing, Israel wants the hostages back. And I really believe that if Hamas were to release the hostages, this war would come to a much quicker conclusion. I think Israel is understanding they are not going to be able to eliminate Hamas completely. They want to degrade their ability to attack them and get to some future between Israel and the Palestinian people that gives Israel greater security.
You have said in the past that this current situation is not sustainable. At the same time, for the very reasons that you just mentioned, Congressman, this is a very dire situation, and a lot of people are skeptical of how you resolve this diplomatically. What is the best way, what is the most effective way that America can provide aid?
I think, number one, really pushing the humanitarian assistance. And, we have a bill that the Senate passed that, most of the focus of that has been on the aid for Ukraine. But there's also billions of dollars in humanitarian assistance, much of which can go to the conflict in Gaza if we pass it. So getting aid, assistance, money there to help. Number two, in the actual conflict, but one of the key ways to end the conflict is, number three, there has to be a future for the Palestinian people. And one positive piece of news, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been saying, there can't be any state for Palestine. But he kind of changed his mind on that just a couple of days ago when the Knesset passed a resolution saying, okay, we're not going to have a state imposed on us by outside forces, but let's negotiate. No preconditions. Let's talk about what it would look like to get a self-governing Palestinian territory. And that's a step that has to be taken. I understand Israel's security concerns. I do. But their security is never going to be achieved if there is not a future for the Palestinian people. And I think Prime Minister Netanyahu believed that they could just sort of ignore the Palestinian problem and everything would be fine. He's wrong about that. There has to be a future for the Palestinian people if Israel is ever going to have peace. And they've got a great opportunity right now because the Arab states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, they want to normalize relations with Israel, in part because of their concern about Iran. But they're not going to do that if there's no future for the Palestinian people.
Well, Mary, the delegation went to the Rafah border. Really interesting situation happening there, dire in many ways. Is humanitarian aid getting through it all?
Well, Representative Smith says that one of the biggest frustrations is the humanitarian crisis. He said that there are lines of trucks there with food, water, and medical supplies. Israel controls what goes through and what doesn't, and he hopes that more will be allowed through soon.
All right, thanks, Mary. We're going to take a quick break. Stay with us.